When you look at nature, like an ant colony or even our own brains, you see these incredibly smart adaptive systems. But here's the crazy thing. There's no single boss in charge. So how does that work? Well, today we're diving into a software framework called AKIRA that tries to copy that exact idea. And this really gets to the heart of it all with one kind of provocative question. Can a crowd of simpletons, a bunch of really basic parts, come together to create a genius? That's the big idea we're going to unpack. But before we can appreciate how cool this new approach is, we have to look at the old way of building things. And that brings us to what's known as the central control problem. Yeah, think about most software you've ever used. It's built like a rigid pyramid, right? There's a central boss at the top making all the decisions, and that makes it slow and flexible, brittle, really. But then you look at a biological system. There's no single controller. It's constantly adapting, it's robust, it just organizes itself. The real question is, how do we get our software to act more like that? Well, that's where this whole new way of thinking comes in, and it's inspired directly by how nature does it. We're talking about a model that looks less like a corporate flowchart and, well, a lot more like a noisy, bustling society. And that model is AKIRA. At its core, it's a framework for building systems out of tons of simple, specialized little modules. And here's the key word. They don't just cooperate, they compete. This whole idea is heavily inspired by Marvin Minsky's classic work on the Society of Mind. So you gotta throw out the idea of one big monolithic brain. Instead, I want you to picture this busy, chaotic society of little agents, which the framework calls demons. And each one is just a narrow-minded specialist, totally obsessed with doing its one little job. And hey, don't just take my word for it. This quote from the source material lays it out perfectly. The whole design philosophy is to build complex things out of these simple, narrow-minded specialists. It's not about making any single piece smarter. It's all about the magic that happens when they interact. So, how does this society actually work? Well, you've got four main parts. First, the demons themselves. They're the workers. To talk to each other, they post messages on a shared blackboard. Now, the really cool part is the energy pool. This is the limited resource that they all have to fight over. And the whole thing is watched over by a server they call the pandemonium. Now, that energy pool thing, that's the secret sauce. Because you might be wondering, okay, if there's no boss, how does anything useful ever get done? The answer is this really elegant idea. Let's call it the energetic game. It's just beautiful in its simplicity. Instead of top-down orders, the demons all compete for a limited resource called energy. And it's this constant competition that forces the system to organize itself and actually focus on a goal. This is what's called the energetic metaphor, and it's the absolute key to understanding AKIRA. A daemon's energy level is everything. It determines its priority, its power, everything. You can think of it like this. The more energy a daemon has, the louder its voice gets in the crowd. So what does a day in the life of a daemon look like? It's a simple little loop. First, it tries to tap the energy pool to get some juice. If it gets some, it executes its job. If it succeeds, great. It gets to shout its result on the blackboard for everyone to see, but that costs a bit of energy. But what if it fails? Well, this is the clever part. It doesn't just die. It spreads its leftover energy to its neighbors, other daemons that it thinks might have a better shot. It's like passing the baton. All right, so theory is great, but does this actually work? Let's get out of the abstract and see this thing in action. We're going to walk through a classic problem that AKIRA just eats for breakfast. So here's the challenge. Find the one red T in the sea of distractions. You've got green T's and red L's everywhere. Now, for you and me, this is a piece of cake. But for a traditional computer program, this is surprisingly hard. It requires a kind of focused attention that they just don't have. So to solve this, AKIRA unleashes its whole society of specialists. You've got super simple daemons at the bottom layer that just shout, hey, there's a dot here. Then you've got others screaming, it's red or it's green. Then another layer yelling about lines, and finally daemons at the top trying to figure out if it's an L or a T. They're all working at once, all shouting over each other. And this is where the magic happens. As the system's spotlight of attention happens to scan over the right answer, which demons start succeeding? Well, the red detector demon and the T detector demon. They start succeeding, so they get more energy, their voices get louder and louder, and they start to dominate the conversation, pulling the whole system's focus right onto the target.
No one told it where to look. It just found its way there.
And look, this isn't just a one-trick pony for visual search. They've used the same idea to build a simulated praying mantis. It uses AKIRA to decide if something is food or a threat. And what it decides depends entirely on the context. If the mantis is hungry, the food-related demons get more energy. If it's scared, the threat-related ones do. The right behavior just emerges from the situation. So when you step back and look at all this, what are we really seeing? It's pointing to this really powerful, almost revolutionary way of thinking about intelligence. One that, doesn't even need a leader. When you build a system this way, you get all these amazing properties almost for free. You get self-organization, real order emerges from simple rules, not some grand blueprint. It's decentralized, so there's no single weak spot that can bring the whole thing down. It's incredibly adaptive, shifting its focus on the fly. And all of this leads to what we call emergent behavior, complex, intelligent action that just arises out of this chaotic competition. So if you take one thing away from this, let it be this. Really complex, smart, goal-oriented behavior doesn't need a central commander. It doesn't need a boss. It can actually emerge from the ground up out of a society of simple parts just doing their thing. And that kind of leaves us with a pretty deep thought to chew on. If something as amazing as intelligence can bubble up from a chaotic crowd of simple agents all competing with each other, what does that say about how our own minds might be put together?